Hello everyone, I'm Abhishek. I'm from Ambedkar University, Delhi, and the title of my paper is Institutionalizing EdTech, Learning Loss, Crisis Level Policymaking, and Digital Education in India. I'll start by setting up the context. Technology has long been seen as a solution to complex social problems. There's a deep-rooted optimism that technology is inherently transformative, synonymous with progress, and even capable of addressing issues of social justice. In education, this belief translates into a strong commitment to EdTech, positioning it as a key tool to expand access, bridge inequalities, and improve learning outcomes. India's EdTech sector has grown rapidly over the last decade, as the data here shows. Then came the pandemic, and as schools shut down, EdTech became the dominant response to learning disruptions during the pandemic. Investments surged during this time, and India was a key part of this boom, as the data here shows, with EdTech becoming one of the country's most funded sectors. This wasn't just a market-driven shift. The Indian government actively incorporated EdTech into official policy. Public-private partnerships were formed, initiatives like PM eVidya were launched, and old programs were also expanded and promoted. EdTech also became a policy imperative. This rapid transformation raises several important questions, and as Tecupier et al. Argue, there's an urgent need to critically analyze this normalization of technology education in terms of its long-term implications and how this restructuring of education shapes policy and governance. It is within this context that I examined Bharat EdTech Initiative, or BEI, as a case of structured efforts to institutionalize EdTech in India. BEI is a multi-sector collaboration aimed at improving educational outcomes for underprivileged students in India through scalable and impactful EdTech interventions. Its stated vision is to enable digital access for 1 million children from low-income households in India and demonstrating improved learning outcomes by 2025. What makes BI significant here is the diverse set of actors it brings together, as I've presented here. Uh, there are over 35 organizations involved in the BEI project. Next, why study BEI? Firstly, BEI incorporates a new collaborative model that integrates major market actors with civil society organizations. It reinforces EdTech as a structured governance solution. Some of its key partners like MSDF and education initiatives, these have been long established players in Indian education policy as identified in previous research. Thirdly, BI actively institutionalizes a vision of the future of EdTech by aligning diverse actors into a complex but coordinated organizational structure. Finally, BI deploys techniques of futuring and constructs powerful aspirational narratives that frame digital learning as a necessary and inevitable solution to educational challenges. This makes BI not just an intervention, but a mechanism for embedding EdTech as a long-term policy imperative. I'm using the concept of techniques of futuring. Scholars on futuring discuss that it's not just about imagining possible futures, but also about actively constructing them through discourse and institutionalizing them through concrete practices. So what BI does is it embeds EdTech into governance structures through these concrete mechanisms, some of which I'm exploring here today. Firstly, resource mobilization, which channels philanthropic and corporate investments as governance tools. Secondly, partnership building, which forms network governance, aligning different actors to shape policy spaces. Thirdly, experimentation, which turns EdTech into a kind of policy lab through piloting and scaling. And lastly, evidence and evaluative metrics, which legitimize these interventions. Through these mechanisms, BI doesn't just advocate for EdTech, it institutionalizes it as a future of education. In the next slides, I'll provide examples of each of the following from my ongoing data collection for my PhD on learning loss and education policy. Double quotes in the following slides are from my data. I think I'll go in detail for one of the examples and I'll gloss over the rest due to limitations of time. Resource mobilization, impact, and outcomes-based financing. BI institutionalizes EdTech through financial mechanisms that align with market-driven governance. A key approach here is outcomes-based financing, which ties funding to measurable results. For instance, the British Asian Trust brings in significant funding and pilots a performance-linked grant here, where funding is triggered only when engagement and learning outcomes are verified by an independent evaluator. This approach embeds an outcome mindset among EdTech firms, ensuring that funding flows are tied to demonstrable impact. It also tries to crisis-driven policy making. The pandemic intensified anxieties around learning loss, creating an urgent demand for scalable technology-driven solutions. And BI capitalizes on this moment by embedding outcome-based financing and financialized models into education policy. This framing of learning loss as an urgent crisis justifies a result-oriented funding model where only interventions that produce measurable results receive financial support. At the same time, this model also reinforces an experimental data-driven urgency where the goal is not just to provide digital education, but to continuously measure, validate, and refine edtech solutions. It does not simply introduce edtech as an alternative. It positions it as a dominant mode of educational intervention by emphasizing scalability and market-driven models. It sort of ensures that digital education is not seen as a temporary pandemic response, but rather as a structural transformation in the way education is delivered. The BI's funding mechanism reflects sort of a broader financialization of education where access to resources is contingent on demonstrating measurable success. Now, this shift the logic of governance from public accountability to market-based efficiency. So I'll just be quick here. Secondly, partnership building, multi-stakeholder collaboration in crisis. This is another way through which it structures an ecosystem that aligns private actors towards a shared vision of digital education. It pushes for a pandemic-driven initiative in response to a crisis. It incentivizes collaboration across for-profit and non-profit sectors. It creates a structured governance model to ensure long-term adoption. It actively institutionalizes it through this ecosystem. This is an excerpt from a report from BI. Experimentation. It creates a phased model where in phase one, it tested edtech in controlled condition by implementing variation in nudges and hardware. It tracks engagement and deployment models for insights into how to maximize edtech adoption. And it also aims to scale it through a phased approach. It uses experimentation in its programs to test, refine, and institutionalize data learning at scale, turning itself into a sort of a policy lab. Lastly, evidence generation and evaluative metrics. BI works to navigate the challenges and measurement around edtech. It acknowledges that it's a nascent field and it aspires to bring strong data analytic capabilities using real-time data from ground for actionable insights by incorporating all these various factors that come from various sectors. It also positions itself, aims to position itself as a key actor to build evidence and knowledge on edtech in India. Its long-term vision is to demonstrate improved learning outcomes, develop benchmark data and best practices, and contribute to governmental guidance on integrating edtech into education policy. In conclusion, I'll say that as I've seen throughout this discussion, the Bharat EdTech initiative operates beyond simply funding or deploying digital learning solutions. It functions as what Williamson calls a meta edtech, an evidence intermediary that defines what effective digital learning looks like, and also as a market maker that scales edtech solutions for mass adoption. It actively shapes impact narratives, determining which solutions are deemed effective and scalable. At the same time, it cultivates a broader edtech ecosystem, reinforcing the idea that India's 400 million students represent a viable market for affordable and low-cost digital learning solutions. Also, by framing edtech as an urgent necessity in response to learning loss, it legitimizes digital learning as a long-term structural solution rather than a short-term intervention. And in doing so, it reinforces some major trends in education governance that we have seen in the last decade, one that is increasingly data-driven, market-led, and structured around public-private partnerships. I'll just let this picture linger for a moment. And yeah, that's the end. Thank you.